I'm Nancy, and I am a safety consultant and educator with Targeted 360, and I am affiliated with Damsel in Defense Personal Protection Products. This is October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and part of bringing awareness to domestic violence is to release the victims of the shame that is surrounded around being abused. And so we're going to be talking to Jamie Cole today. She has a pretty incredible story, and she's very brave, coming forward as a domestic violence survivor to share her story with many layers. She's going to share her story, and I think, Jamie, for sure, this is going to hit so many different people in so many areas. And I thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. But first, who is Jamie? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very glad to have the opportunity to share my story so that we can work together to end the violence. So who I am, my name is Jamie, and I'll just throw this out there. I'm a 44-year-old mother of two. I have two kids in college right now. One's 19, one's 20. So I'm technically an empty nester, which leaves me a lot of time to do other things like sing in the community chorale. I'm very active in my church and with my church ministry, such as youth ministry. I'm a call taker for a crisis support line. Let's see. Oh, I also spend a lot of time at the gym.
I was just going to say, come on.
I spend a lot of time at the gym. That is something I'm very passionate about, fitness, nutrition. And one of the reasons why I am so active at the gym is because I want to encourage and inspire other people to be the best version of themselves, whatever that means for them. And for me, it means being able to walk on the street and be hyper vigilant and know that I'm going to be able to take care of myself if something were to happen to me.
Yeah.
A lot of my fitness.
I've seen your gym pictures. I don't think people are messing with you.
Yeah, I think I'm probably doing pretty good in that regard so far. But it is
fantastic. Yes.
Thank you. It's very much a passion for me. And a lot of people know that that's something that I'm doing, but they don't really know my background and they don't know why. So I'm glad to share the story today.
Well, thank you so much. And this can get a little emotional because I know from my own experience, once I start talking about something from the past, it kind of still, even though you're talking about something in the past, it still brings up those same emotions that you were feeling at the time. So I know this is difficult, and I'm really, really thankful for you to be sharing this with us. And it's just going to help so many people. So can you give us just a little bit, about what happened, and then I'll just ask a few questions along the way if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we are limited on time, but I could probably talk about this for maybe like 2 days straight without a break.
Yeah, I know.
But in a nutshell, I was a police officer in Ohio when I came out of college way back in the day. For a couple of years, then I had my son, I had my daughter, I got married. Ended up going to law school, became a lawyer, and practiced law for many years, but always had the draw to go back to law enforcement. And I ended up divorced along the way. Nothing really spectacular about that relationship. And when I moved to Arizona, I became a partner at a law firm. Things were great, but I was bodybuilding at the time. I just started this journey in August of 2015. And I happened to meet someone at the gym who was my abuser. His name was Joe Pacello. At the time, he was a sergeant at the Goodyear Police Department. And I was working as a lawyer at a law firm.
Right.
And I noticed, that he was working with other women. He had them wearing weighted vests and, they were doing all kinds of really cool stuff. And I was training for my first competition. And so I flagged him down in the parking lot one day, and I noticed that he was in an unmarked vehicle, and having been a police officer, I knew he was in law enforcement.
Right.
And I was like, hey, just curious, what are you doing with those women? Are you training them? And so it turned out that they were friends of his. It was his barber and her friends and whatever. So he had a habit of working with women at the gym. And I was like, well, he's very built. He was an IFBB pro, which if you're not in the bodybuilding world, that's like someone that has their pro card.
Okay.
They have successfully gone up the chain in competition.
Wow.
And so I was like super excited to meet him and to know that he was a police officer because man, I gave up on being a police officer so early
Yeah.
in my life and it was exciting to me. Um,
Yeah.
so we became friends. He started working with me in the gym. I gave him my phone number because I was going to a competition in California and then I was going to a competition in Tempe. And so I was showing him my photos. So now we had exchanged numbers. He didn't wear a wedding ring at the gym, so I really didn't know like what his situation was. I was living with someone at the time that wasn't going very well. Um, and so we just kind of developed this relationship around the gym.
Hmm.
And, then he started talking to me about, hey, would you want to be a cop again? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm probably too old. And we started talking about that. I got all my records from Ohio. Somehow those were all available. And I sent that all over to him.
Right.
And like one thing at a time, just I got really excited about the idea of being a police officer. I was
Right.
really excited about competing. I won first place in all my competitions.
Nice.
Life was good.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the man that I moved to Arizona with and lived with for 5 years slipped into alcoholism, depression, and one day he left.
Hmm.
And I was a little distraught and I was at the gym and I think that vulnerability opened
Hmm.
the door for a more personal relationship.
Yes.
And so that's where it all started.
Okay.
Um I was, at the same time we started to have a relationship. We
Hmm.
never dated because it turned out he was married.
Right. Right. Right.
So there was no dating per se. It was more all around the gym. Let's meet at the gym. Let's get together after the gym. Hey, we're hiring. I'm the hiring and recruiting guy. So yeah, I'm going to help you through this
I'll train.
process.
Yeah, I'll train you and get you ready. And yeah.
So that is how that relationship came about.
Okay. And now, how did this relationship kind of progress?
Yeah. So we continued to train at the gym and then it would be like, hey, you're working so hard and you're working so well, but I have these magic hands and how about I come over and I'll give you a massage and I'll help you work out the lactic acid and I'll help
Right.
you out. And I was like, no, you're married, you're married, you're married, you're married. One day I was like, okay, that's fine, come on over. He was persistent. I was
Hmm.
vulnerable. He came over and nothing happened,
Hmm.
but he was very close to places he shouldn't have been so close to.
Right.
And I started to really like sense that he was interested in more than just being like gym partners.
Right.
Um, and as soon as he left my house that day, he called me and he's like, "You're a very good girl." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, he's like, you could have jumped all over me, but you didn't." And I'm like, "Well, no, you're married and that's
Hmm.
weird. Like, I wouldn't do that."
Right.
But the persistence, the persistence, the persistence, he started buying me gifts. The other guy had left, things were chaos for me.
Hmm.
I just got suckered in,
Yeah.
you
I mean,
know?
listen, we all do things that we wish we hadn't done. I know you're not, your story is you're not condoning being involved with a married man. But just because you made that decision doesn't take away from the fact that you were abused. We're not blaming, there's no victim blaming. Nobody is perfect, right? Like everybody sometimes makes choices that might not have been their best decision, right? We're more concerned about you and the ordeal you went through and how brave you were to come forward with it. Like how long were you a police officer in Goodyear?
So I got hired at the end of December 2015 and I came forward with my disclosure in August of 2020. So about
Okay.
5 years.
Yeah, okay. And then what like, so when you were a police officer, what were your goals within the police department?
My goodness. I saw myself retiring from the police department. I saw myself becoming a chief of police, honestly.
Mhm.
I won't lie. I mean, I had the legal background, I
Yeah.
had the communication skills, the physicality, like
Mhm.
other guys on the department. I remember getting in the car with Brad Harden, who's now, well, was a sergeant at the time that I left, and he was field training me for just one day. And he said, you know, you're going to be the chief someday. Like, this guy didn't know me, but he knew of me.
Yeah.
And for him to say that, because he was one of those with the reputation of being really rough and gruff. And for him to say that was super impactful.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to be, yeah, yeah. I loved the career. I loved the job.
Right. What happened in 2017?
Yeah. So we got together first in October of 2015. I was hired in December 2015.
Mhm.
And the first time I recognized aggression and concern was in February 2016. So it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Um, I was not comfortable in the relationship. And as soon as I started working there, like, I was getting in trouble for everything. He was criticizing me, condemning me. Don't hang out with this person. Don't do this. Don't
Oh,
do that.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Judging everything, reading my reports, driving by calls that I was on, traffic stops. It was a lot. And I wanted out of the relationship. Plus, he was married. I felt guilty, ashamed. I stopped going to church. I just felt like I was such a sinner.
Mhm.
I felt really bad, and I just wanted
Right.
out.
Right.
And he wasn't letting me out. What does that mean? I mean, like, he literally wasn't letting me out. No, I'm not going to let you quit this. And, I'm not going to let a good thing go. He never intended on leaving his wife. He told me that, but
Mhm.
he wanted to keep me where I was.
Right.
Uh, so, so I went on dating app, and I started, like, seeing what was out there. And I
Right.
thought, maybe if I just meet someone and start dating someone, that will help me, like, get out of this. Um, and I happened to come across a profile of someone that I recognized from the city, and it
Mhm.
was someone on the fire side. And it was one of, like, the higher ups on the fire side, and I
Mhm.
definitely want to protect his confidentiality.
Sure.
So we started talking. He didn't know I was in this relationship. So we one day we met for lunch. He was on duty, I was on duty, full uniform, sitting at a public restaurant. And oh my gosh, of all the places, all three chiefs of my police department walk in at that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not good. This is not good. Joe's going to find out. Joe's going to find out. I ended up telling the guy that I was seeing or talking to, I was like, I can't do this. I can't pursue this, because I was so
No, it's
nervous
gonna
about it.
start. Yeah. Mhm.
And I think he was mad that I, like, broke it off. About 3 weeks later, this makes me sweat. About 3 weeks later, I got a phone call while I'm on patrol, which wasn't unusual because this guy called me all day, every day, all the time.
You're talking about Pacello now.
Yes.
Okay.
So he calls me and he's like, "Is there something you want to tell me?" I'm like, "Oh gosh, this is a trap. I don't know. There's probably a lot of things that I should tell him that I don't want to tell him. I don't know what he's referring to. I don't want to volunteer anything.
Right.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And he tells me that he just had a meeting with the three chiefs because he works in the office of the chief, and he was in charge of internal affairs as a lieutenant.
Mm.
And he just starts laying into me about, I'm a whore and you betrayed me and you're an effing liar. And the guy's from New York, so he uses a lot of swear language.
Mhm.
And he's just laying into me.
I'm sorry.
And you should kill yourself because you just betrayed me. Mind you, the man is married.
Yeah.
And we are, what, years into this situation? Well, not years. Yeah, 2 years in.
Mhm.
Um, this went on for 2 days. My mom was in town for hip surgery. She had a hip replacement. And I was crying. I was on my days off after he called me. I was on my days off, and the messages just kept coming. Kill yourself. You're a you're a whore. You're a whore. Like, he loved that word. And I showed my mom because I was crying, and she's like, you need to tell someone. And I'm like, no, I will lose my job. He's in charge of internal affairs. Like,
Right.
who am I going to tell? Everybody loves him. He works for the chief.
Right,
Who am I
right.
going to tell?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I'm going to call. I'm like, don't you dare. You're going to ruin my career. I begged her not to.
Mhm.
So this went on for my 2 days off. And then on third day off, I get a message from him. Meet me at my house. I'm like, okay, this is how it usually goes with him. He gets really upset about stuff. He rages, and
Mhm.
then he's calm. And
Right.
then it's like, don't do it again.
Mhm.
So I drove over to his house sometime in February 2017, thinking like, all right, we're going to talk through this now. And thank goodness, we can get past this.
Right.
I walked into his house, thinking that he was going to hug me. I come through the lot. He makes me park in the garage. He closes the garage. I walk into the laundry area, walk towards the kitchen where I think he's going to hug me because he kind of comes in at me. And he was a wrestler, like a professional Hall of Fame wrestler.
Mhm.
And I didn't know he had handcuffs in his hand. And he spun me around, put me in a rear choke, and handcuffed one of my hands. At that point, I panicked and started
Okay.
flailing around and trying to get out of this, and I was kicking, and his dogs were like right there. And his dogs were right there. He said, you kick my fucking dog one more time. And I'm sorry for my language. It's
No,
exactly what he said. I'm going to fucking kill you. And I stopped fighting. And he handcuffed my other hand, and he never double locked the cuffs. So they cinched on my wrists, and I had
right.
nerve damage.
Mm. From this
Oh.
incident. Wow.
So then he blindfolds me. He takes me over to one of the bar stools that has like a metal seat back. And he puts my handcuffed arms over the seat back, and I'm completely restrained and blindfolded. He takes my phone, he searches my phone, and he plays loud Metallica music.
Mhm.
He just, and I'm crying, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
What was going through your head while you're sitting there handcuffed and blindfolded? What was
Like,
did
what
you
is
think, like
happening?
yeah,
What,
like, I
what is
mean, did you
happening?
think this was it? Like, did you think this might be the last day or
Not yet.
not yet? Okay.
until he asked me, he checked my phone, and then he asked me if anybody knew where I was. And I
Mm,
lied to him, and I told him that I told my mom, because I didn't tell anyone where I was.
right.
And then he had an engraving, a Dremel tool, which we use to engrave our handcuffs and our mag lights and things like that.
Right. Mhm.
And he had that, and he turned it on, and you could hear that vibrating noise. And he held it up to this side of my face. And it was so close, like I could kind of feel the vibration. And that's when I thought he was going to kill me, because he said he was going to carve a scarlet letter in my face. He said he was going to carve a W for whore in my face. And I thought for sure if he did that, that he would have to kill me. And he lived in the desert at the end of the community where he could have dumped my body.
Right. Right.
Um, and that's when he was saying things like, your kids are going to grow up without a mom. That's so sad. And
Wow.
that's when I thought, oh my God. Um, that was the first part. And
Right.
then after that torture and torment, he took me off the back of the chair, still handcuffed, still blindfolded, led me to his bedroom. The bedroom was downstairs.
Mhm.
And he took me to the bathroom where he had already filled the garden tub with water and bags of ice cubes.
So he planned this. This was all premeditated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he admitted to
Yeah,
doing all
'cause
of this.
this wasn't just, a crime of passion or just rage. This was thought out and planned.
And it wasn't, hey, come over. I want to train you for the SWAT team. It
Right,
was,
right,
you whore, you lie. You're just
right. It was personal. It wasn't training for a SWAT team.
exactly. He began to submerge my head in the water, which I don't know if you've ever been in ice cold water. If you go into ice cold water, it takes your breath away.
Mhm, right.
He put my face in there, which made me like I
Yeah.
felt, I felt like I was drowning.
Mhm.
And he held my head there and I couldn't move because I was handcuffed. I don't know how many times or for how long. Every time he pulled me up, he would yell at me and tell me that I need to breathe, that I need to calm down, and that I'm not SWAT material. That's when he started talking about SWAT. I'm not SWAT material because I can't breathe through this and not because I can't handle it. And he started coaching me through this drowning process. Eventually, he sat me on the edge of the thing, and I was like, "Can you please take these cuffs off because they were twisted and they hurt?"
Mhm.
And he just, like a narcissist does, just that rage, just talked and talked at
Yeah,
me and talked at me and talked at me, called me names, all the things I did wrong, all of my inadequacies, everything.
right. How long did the water incident, do you
I,
think? You
I
have
have
no
no idea.
idea. And then what happened after he was done torturing you? Because that's water torture. After he was done torturing you in that way, what happened?
So then the tenor of his communication changed, and uh, what can I do? What can I do to get out? What do you want me to say? I'll say anything. I'll do anything you want.
Right,
I need you to prove your loyalty to me.
right.
And that's when the sex assault happened. Um, the way for me to earn my freedom was to prove that I was going to be loyal to him. And he forced me to give him oral sex. During my IA interview as a witness with the agency that did the IA DPS,
Mhm.
um, he also admitted to having sex with me. I don't remember having sex with him. It may have happened, but I don't remember it. He eventually uh, let me go, but he said, if you tell anyone, I'm just going to tell them I was training you for SWAT.
Wow.
And I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but SWAT training or SWAT testing was super secret. So
Yeah, Hell Day. I
yeah.
read in the article, they called it Hell Day, and it was really unorthodox for that department to even do. And what I saw, it looked like, wow, this is like Navy SEAL training, basically. And we're talking about a police department. What prompted you to tell your story in 2020? And what, like, did you still continue the relationship with Pacello i- in those years? And I think the reason I'm asking this is because so many victims get abused and go through really, what you went through is incredible. Um, but then they still stay with their abuser, and there's many reasons for that. It's self-worth, because we are broken down to feel like we don't deserve any better than this. It's fear of leaving. And people just don't understand that, but that's just not that easy. So can you just touch on a little bit, and we're running out of time, but just touch on, you know, why you stayed, why you think you stayed, I should say, and what made you come to the decision to actually tell your story.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy. It's fear. It was fear. Fear for my life. He showed me what he was capable of. He alluded to the fact that somewhere in New York he committed a crime and he doesn't know what the statute of limitations is, but he made me believe that he is capable of really bad things, and he showed me just how scary he can be.
Right.
Um so fear, but also like my job. I loved my job so much. I wish I was still there. I wish I was still at that agency. Um, yeah. So fear of losing my job and my reputation as well. And also, when I'm driving away from his house, do I call 911?
Right. Yeah.
Like, hey, so and so dispatcher, whoever answers the phone. Hey, Joe just assaulted me at his house.
Right.
What do you do? The guy who's in the office of the chief, who everybody loves and worships, and he's part of the charity and all these things. Like, what do you do? I did
Yeah.
not know what to do. I did end up telling my shift supervisor in 2019, and he ended up getting in trouble for this because I begged him, please don't say anything. Please don't tell anyone. And, unfortunately, he got sucked into this because when we did a confrontation call, the third party consent call,
Hmm.
after my forensic interview, Joe was like, I want Troy there. And so the detective was like, who's Troy? And I'm like, well, I didn't tell you in my forensic interview, but Troy is my shift supervisor. And I did tell Troy what happened in 2019. Well, why didn't you tell me during the forensic interview? Well, I didn't want to get him in trouble. And that man ended up getting in trouble, and he probably hates me. And I hope he sees this and realizes that I did not sell him out. But I told him, and I said very specifically to him, Troy, I need you to know about this, because if I turn up missing or dead, I
Right.
need you to know where to look. Somebody needs to know where to look,
Right.
because the relationship was so secretive. Uh, so yeah. Courage to come forward? None. I didn't have courage. I came forward because I was at the point where I started dating someone out of state. It was like a safe space for me to go out of state and
Right.
be away. But somehow every time I was gone, Joe seemed to know. I was like, is there a tracker in my car? Like, why is he calling me constantly? Well, you're my negotiations team leader, so I need to be able to reach you, and I need to know where you are. And if you're out of state, I need to know.
Wow.
I was just like trying to get away from this guy. And no matter what I did, he was always there. And I couldn't get away from him. And I just broke down one day, and I went to a guy at the advocacy center, who happened to be the man that was physically assaulted by Joe many years ago, suffered a TBI because
Wow.
Joe shoved his face into a urinal. I told him what happened, and he took me straight to the chief's office and said, "You've got to report it." My
Why did
career.
you, and you left, and I know you said you left your job because you were in fear. And I think you just explained why you would be in fear. I am so sorry this happened to you. This shouldn't happen to anyone. We're running short on time, but I know you then were in a relationship, another abusive relationship. Um, and you don't really have to go into that one, but that kind of just shows what happens to domestic violence victims. You really do lose your self-worth. And then these, narcissists, right? They're very charming in the beginning. And then, they suck you in, and then they just break you down with the gaslighting and all that. So I know you went into a secondary relationship. You were able to get out of that. So you're a survivor, you're a true survivor. What are you doing for yourself, to end this cycle?
Yeah. Recognizing that I am a common denominator in it, and that I had childhood traumas.
Hmm.
The way that I was raised as a child, constantly trying to please my parents.
Right.
Um, I became a people pleaser, and it was very easy for me to fall into this cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
I now go to therapy. I do EMDR and other therapies like IFS. every single week. I've been doing it since 2019. I
Wow.
finally found a therapist here that's making tremendous progress for me. Um, Nutrition, fitness, church, God, thank God, community, people like you, all the other ladies in UN.
Yes.
Um,
You have a great group.
yeah, and I've also put out a lot of content on my YouTube channel about my ex-husband and the abuse that I went through, and I'm kind
Okay.
of backtracking. So I'll cover this stuff in
I
more.
was just gonna say, I would love to do a follow-up interview with you if you're open to that.
Absolutely.
Too, because I'd like to dive into it a little more. I know we just kind of focused on your story as a police officer, but I would love to talk more with you. We do have a lot in common. We're both police officers that were victims while being a police officer, which is a whole nother dynamic because you're supposed to be protecting victims from this, and you're a victim yourself, and you're ashamed, and you don't want to report it. And so it's just it's a tough scenario. So we have to talk more. I think we can really bring awareness to the domestic abuse that happens within the relationship. And my abuser was a police officer as well. So both of us having that background as being law enforcement officers and being in an abusive relationship with law enforcement officers kind of gives us a unique story. But I don't know how unique it is, to be honest. Not really sure how many people out there are going through the same thing. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being with me today and sharing your story. I know that was really hard. It was hard to listen to. I can only imagine how hard it was to retell it, feel the feels all over again, and what it must have been like to go through that. Thank you so much. And we will be back together for a part 2.